The Supreme Court later limited that immunity in 2024, and legal proceedings continue. Approximately 500,000 Americans tragically died of opioid overdoses between 1999 and 2019. The vast majority of these deaths in the early years stemmed from prescription opioids, not illicit street drugs. The street drug crisis emerged later as addicted individuals, no longer able to obtain prescriptions, turned to heroin and subsequently fentanyl. OxyContin was the spark. The prescription pad was the delivery mechanism. And the system, including the FDA, DEA, DOJ, and medical licensing boards, failed. It failed not randomly, but in ways that consistently benefited the company at the expense of countless human lives. No Sackler went to prison. No McKinsey partner went to prison. The FDA official who approved the drug and then went to work for Purdue was never charged. DEA investigators' warnings were buried and never received a public hearing. 500,000 people died. The mechanisms of this catastrophic failure are meticulously documented in court records, openly accessible to anyone. Yet, the people who designed and optimized this system are largely still wealthy, still free, and in some cases, still consulting. That is not the product of a clandestine conspiracy. That is the system working exactly as it was allowed to work. The only reason any of this has come to light is because a handful of dedicated state attorneys general, tenacious investigative journalists, and determined families decided that documented evidence should, indeed, mean something. It still might. The legal proceedings are not yet concluded. But 500,000 people did not get to wait for the verdict. In 2007, Purdue Pharma pleaded guilty to federal criminal charges of misbranding OxyContin, admitting to lying about the drug's addiction risk. The fine was $600 million, a seemingly paltry sum compared to their profits. No Sackler family member went to prison. 3 mid-level executives pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges and paid personal fines. The company paid and, chillingly, continued operating. OxyContin continued selling. The Sacklers continued collecting dividends. What transpired after the guilty plea is critically important because it offers a stark demonstration of exactly how the system protects itself. After 2007, Purdue began a cynical strategic pivot. Anticipating that OxyContin might eventually face stricter regulation, they expanded into the addiction treatment market. Purdue's Rhodes Pharma developed buprenorphine, a drug used for opioid addiction. The Sackler family thus positioned themselves to profit from the addiction treatment market that their own product had so devastatingly created. They were, in essence, manufacturing the disease and acquiring the cure. Between 2008 and 2016, following the guilty plea, the Sackler family systematically withdrew between $10 and $12 billion from Purdue Pharma. They meticulously moved this money into trusts, foundations, and accounts specifically structured to protect these assets from future legal liability. They were, quite simply, looting the company while it was under legal siege, aided by sophisticated law firms and financial advisors. Purdue declared bankruptcy in 2019. The Sackler family then negotiated a controversial settlement for immunity from civil claims, offering $4.5 billion to settlement funds, a mere fraction of what they had already extracted. A federal judge initially blocked the settlement, rightly noting that it granted immunity to family members who had not themselves declared bankruptcy, effectively using corporate bankruptcy to shield personal wealth. They built intricate models, ran complex analyses, and produced strategic presentations with titles like Maintaining Momentum and Strategies for Evolving the Sales Force, designed to sustain prescription growth even in the face of escalating regulatory pressure. In one documented McKinsey analysis, consultants modeled the relationship between sales force activity and prescription volume, recommending that Purdue focus its highest-effort sales representatives on the highest-volume prescribers. These were doctors writing thousands of opioid prescriptions annually. Some of them were later convicted of drug trafficking. McKinsey's data-driven recommendation was to send more sales reps to these doctors more often. In 2017, even as the opioid crisis dominated front-page news, as states sued Purdue, and as Congress held hearings, McKinsey consultants held a meeting with Purdue executives and produced a presentation that included a slide analyzing what would happen if the FDA tightened OxyContin restrictions. The slide modeled the potential loss of revenue. It discussed mitigation strategies. Crucially, there was no slide in that presentation modeling the human cost of continued aggressive marketing. There was no mention of overdose deaths. There was only revenue, projected, protected, optimized. In another exhibit, McKinsey consultants proposed what they termed a rebate program. Purdue would pay distributors a rebate for every OxyContin prescription that ultimately resulted in an overdose treated with Narcan, the overdose reversal drug. This truly astonishing proposal is in the documents. It reveals a major consulting firm helping a pharmaceutical company create a financial mechanism that treated human tragedy as a calculable business variable to be offset, rather than a harm to be prevented. McKinsey ultimately paid $600 million to settle state attorneys' general claims related to their opioid consulting work. No McKinsey partner, however, was criminally charged. Senior officials with closer ties to the pharmaceutical industry made decisions that effectively buried Geltzoff's vital work in bureaucracy. There is a documented meeting in 2002 where DEA investigators expressed grave concerns about abuse patterns to Purdue executives. Purdue's response, rather than addressing the concerns, was a cunning strategy of regulatory capture. They hired former DEA officials as consultants, essentially recruiting the regulators into their orbit. 3 former DEA officials ultimately ended up working for Purdue in roles related to regulatory compliance and government affairs. While this practice is legally permissible, it is also the precise mechanism by which regulatory capture works. The very people tasked with enforcing the rules become dependent on the industry they are supposed to oversee. By 2001, OxyContin was generating astronomical profits for Purdue, amounting to $1.5 billion per year. The Sackler family's personal wealth swelled to $14 billion. And in parts of rural America, life expectancy was tragically falling for the first time since the Spanish flu pandemic, yet the profit-driven machine kept running relentlessly. Then came McKinsey. McKinsey & Company is widely regarded as the most prestigious management consulting firm in the world. Governments engage their services. Fortune 500 companies rely on their expertise. They're the go-to firm for powerful institutions seeking strategic optimization. Purdue Pharma engaged McKinsey in 2004, then again in 2008, and multiple times thereafter through to 2018. What McKinsey helped them achieve is meticulously documented in court exhibits that emerged from state attorney general investigations. In 2008, as concerns about OxyContin abuse became impossible to ignore, as states began investigations and news coverage intensified, McKinsey consultants assisted Purdue in developing sophisticated strategies to counter the negative narrative. He approved the drug, using language directly borrowed from Purdue's marketing materials. A mere 18 months after granting that approval, Curtis Wright left the FDA and took up a position at Purdue Pharma with a first-year salary of $379,000. This is all meticulously documented. He transitioned from approving the drug to being handsomely paid by the very company manufacturing it, a clear illustration of regulatory capture. The approval label was of paramount importance because sales representatives could legally utilize the FDA's imprimatur in their marketing. Once the FDA label declared low abuse potential, Purdue could tell every doctor in America that the federal government had validated their safety claims. The FDA's approval wasn't just regulatory clearance, it was transformed into a potent sales instrument, and the man who authored that label went on to work for Purdue. The Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, identified the emerging crisis well ahead of almost anyone else. By 1999, DEA diversion investigators were observing OxyContin moving through communities in Appalachia, rural Maine, and parts of Florida in ways that bore no resemblance to legitimate medicine. They were identifying disturbing anomalies, massive prescription volumes originating from single doctors, individuals driving for hours across state lines to specific pharmacies, and OxyContin appearing in drug seizures at rates that indicated systematic diversion. A diligent DEA investigator named James Geltzoff began meticulously compiling data. He documented specific doctors, pharmacies, and geographical hotspots. He pushed internally for decisive action against Purdue, advocating for a direct investigation into the company and urging the use of the DEA's authority to challenge the marketing. His investigations, however, were inexplicably slowed. Resources were redirected. Purdue was effectively paying doctors to market to other doctors, masquerading this activity as legitimate medical education. And the insidious message remained consistent. Pain is undertreated. OxyContin is safe. Addiction is rare. So prescribe more. Here is what Purdue knew and when they knew it. Internal documents that later emerged during litigation paint a damning picture. By 1997, just 1 year after its launch, Purdue employees were already receiving alarming reports of widespread OxyContin abuse and illicit diversion. Sales representatives were sending urgent memos to management, detailing graphic accounts from their territories. OxyContin was being crushed and snorted. People were referring to it as hillbilly heroin. And pharmacies were being specifically robbed for OxyContin. Despite these urgent warnings, the senior executives acknowledged and discussed them, but crucially ignored the escalating crisis, allowing the sales campaign to continue unchanged. By 1999, Purdue's own researchers had internal data proving that the slow-release mechanism, the very cornerstone of OxyContin's supposed safety argument, was easily defeated by simply crushing the tablet. The reformulation that was explicitly designed to prevent abuse could be circumvented in a mere 10 seconds with a standard pill crusher. They did not change the formula. They did not alter the marketing. They merely flagged it internally and continued selling. Now, the story broadens, revealing the complicity of regulatory bodies, because Purdue did not act alone in this endeavor. The FDA approved OxyContin in 1995 with a label stating that the delayed absorption was believed to reduce the drug's abuse liability. Believed to, not demonstrated to, not proven in clinical trials. A mere supposition. That vague, yet critical phrase originated directly from Purdue's own submission. The FDA's medical reviewer overseeing the OxyContin application was a doctor named Curtis Wright. Their launch materials confidently informed doctors that the addiction risk was less than 1%. They possessed utterly no clinical evidence to support this claim. It was fabricated, a deceptive blend of speculative internal optimism and a misrepresented snippet from that 5-sentence letter, all dressed up as legitimate science. But it worked, largely because of the meticulously crafted structure of Purdue's sales campaign. Arthur Sackler had invented the concept of detailing. His nephews, with ruthless efficiency, perfected it. Purdue amassed a formidable army of 671 sales representatives, equipping them with a compensation model almost no pharmaceutical company had implemented before on such an unprecedented scale. They paid bonuses directly tied to the sheer volume of OxyContin prescriptions doctors in their assigned territories wrote. A sales representative covering a rural Appalachian region could, in a single year, earn a staggering $70,000 in bonuses, simply by persuading local doctors to prescribe more. These reps were given sophisticated targeting tools, lists known as prescriber profiles detailing the highest prescribing doctors in their region. Disturbingly, some of these highest prescribers were later found to be running pill mills, clinics existing purely to churn out prescriptions. Yet, Purdue's sales reps relentlessly courted these dubious operations, visiting them repeatedly because their bonuses depended entirely on it. They lured doctors with lavish, all-expenses-paid trips to pain management seminars in attractive destinations like Scottsdale and Florida. They distributed a bizarre array of promotional merchandise, including OxyContin-branded fishing hats, stuffed animals, and music CDs. They also created a speaker program where doctors were paid thousands of dollars to deliver talks to their peers about OxyContin's supposed benefits. These paid speakers were often the very same physicians who were already the highest prescribers. This remained the case until they recognized an opportunity that would ultimately make them billionaires and, chillingly, contribute to the deaths of 500,000 people. In the early 1990s, a critical juncture emerged in the field of pain medicine. For decades, doctors had historically undertreated chronic pain, largely due to a profound fear of opioids' addiction potential. However, a concerted campaign began, spearheaded by a small group of pain advocates, some legitimate, others demonstrably funded by pharmaceutical companies. They argued persuasively that opioids were being unfairly stigmatized, asserting that addiction was a rare occurrence when these drugs were used for genuine pain relief. A single, incredibly brief letter, just 5 sentences long, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1980, became a pivotal piece of this narrative. Written by a doctor named Herschel Jick, it stated that among hospitalized patients administered opioids, addiction was rare. Crucially, that letter was not a rigorous study. It lacked any scientific methodology. It was merely an observation about hospital patients given short-term medication under close supervision. Yet, over the subsequent 2 decades, this anecdote would be astonishingly cited 600 times in medical literature, presented as definitive proof that opioids don't cause addiction. The pharmaceutical industry expertly leveraged this 5-sentence letter, using it to fundamentally reshape how an entire medical profession perceived and managed opioid risk. Purdue Pharma launched OxyContin in 1996. OxyContin was essentially oxycodone, a powerful opioid that had been in existence for decades, but reformulated into a slow-release tablet. The theoretical benefit was that this slow-release mechanism would provide steadier pain control with less euphoria, thereby supposedly reducing the risk of addiction. Purdue's audacious marketing claimed it was inherently safer than traditional opioids. Every year, a staggering 80,000 Americans succumb to opioid overdoses. This devastating annual toll eclipses the combined fatalities from car accidents and gun violence, and tragically, it surpasses the total number of American lives lost throughout the entire Vietnam War, year after year, on repeat. But here is the grim reality that obituaries often omit: these were not mere accidents. They were not simply the tragic outcome of vulnerable individuals making poor choices. Instead, they were the predicted, meticulously modeled, and ultimately accepted consequences of a calculated business strategy. And we know this with unequivocal certainty because the evidence is undeniable. Internal documents exist, damning emails have been unearthed, and comprehensive PowerPoint presentations bear witness. Executives, seated in corporate boardrooms, coldly calculated the number of lives that would be lost and determined that the potential profits were a worthwhile trade-off. This is not mere conjecture. These chilling facts were substantiated and revealed in open court. Allow me to unravel the complex web of exactly how this crisis unfolded, who engineered it, and why almost nobody faced significant prison time. In 1952, a perceptive doctor named Arthur Sackler made a revolutionary insight. Pharmaceutical companies were not primarily selling medicine to patients, they were selling to doctors. Arthur pioneered the groundbreaking strategy of detailing, deploying an army of charming, impeccably trained sales representatives directly to physicians. These reps arrived armed with free samples, lavish gifts, and what appeared to be sponsored research. He effectively transformed drug marketing into a sophisticated science. Upon his death in 1987, his brothers, Mortimer and Raymond, inherited his stake in Purdue Frederick, a small pharmaceutical company known for unremarkable products like laxatives and earwax remover.